Should be live. There we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Brain. This is our weekly webinar and podcast here at Doman International, where parents join from around the world and ask us their biggest and toughest questions about their children with special needs. We do our best to answer them. And we work through this podcast to give parents holistic solutions to the problems that their children face. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. I'm joined here by Colleen Hudson, who's the Director of Representatives here at Doman International. And whether you're joining right now on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, you can type your questions into the comments box and we will answer them in order. And we look forward to answering them. A couple of quick announcements. So just to give you an idea of Doman International's calendar for the upcoming months, of course, we have appointments available throughout the year at our headquarters here in Philadelphia in the United States. We just completed our trip to India, where we saw families in Bangalore and New Delhi, India. Coming up in June, we're seeing families in Melbourne, Australia. In July, at our headquarters in Europe, in Pisa, Italy. In August, we're going to be seeing families in New Zealand. In September, in Serbia and Croatia. I guess we'll be back to India in November. Colleen, any places that I'm missing?
Did you say Italy? Did I miss Italy?
You
said Italy. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay. I don't think so. Yeah, I feel a little like it's sometimes a little hard to keep track because we're so many places. So, which is a great problem to have.
So, yeah, we have appointments available in Philadelphia at our headquarters, but also remotely online for families who cannot travel. Colleen, do you have an idea of when our next available appointments are here in the U.S.?
Yes, so we are currently scheduling for June. I'd say we tend to like to have 4 weeks or so to prepare because there are labs to pull, there are lectures to watch. So for families who now look, if you live nearby and you're saying, gosh, we'd really love to see you the first week of June, call me today because I think we have one space left available for that first week. But June is a good month for anybody who's looking at traveling to see us because that's a month that we're all here the whole month. July, we begin to travel again. There's Italy in August and September, and so June's a really good time to shoot for. But we have other availability, so please look at your calendar. And even if you're planning out several months in advance, there's a lot that we can do in the interim. So don't wait until it gets closer, and then we'll talk to you because the spaces can fill up.
Absolutely. Well, perfect. So, again, whether you're joining right now on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, or in the StreamYard platform where we're doing this webinar, just type your questions into the comments box and we will answer them in order. I always like to say that some parents will post their questions very late. Sometimes we can't get to them all, so better to post them earlier. So today, our topic of the week is it's called the Working Parents Guide, Consistency Over Perfection. So we're really going to focus today on, especially for parents who also might work, families where both parents work, what are some ways that you can implement the Doman Method program at home with success? And we've been talking about the importance of not biting off more than you can chew with starting the Doman Method over the last few weeks on this webinar. And I thought that one way we could look at how we, Doman International, help guide families with getting started with the Doman Method program and how we structure the program. It might be helpful for us to look at something called the program sheet. A program sheet is basically the cover document that a family receives when they come for their appointment with Doman International. So what happens is when families come to our clinics around the world, the first thing we do with that child is we do something called a functional neurological evaluation, where we have the child do different activities and our evaluators assess where that child is in their development compared to their peers. And we use a tool called the developmental profile, which we have been using and developing and perfecting over 70 years to track how a child is developing compared to their neurotypical peers. Once we've done that evaluation, our team meets and we develop a program for the child. And one of the first things, actually, it's the first thing we hand to a family when we are teaching them their child's new program that the family is going to go home and do daily. The first thing we hand them is this program sheet. And I think it does a pretty good job of illustrating not just how we organize a family and their program, but also our mindset when it comes to having success with the program. So I'm going to share this document. Give me 1 second. And Colleen, as usual, you'll have to tell me if you see it up on the screen.
Will do.
All right.
I do see it. And
Perfect.
now it's big enough to be seen, easily. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So as everyone can see, so this is a program sheet document. This is what we will hand in the first meeting teaching the new program to a family. And a director will go over this document with the family. And I want to start, I took a child, this is a sample program sheet from an actual child. And I want to kind of lead you through it because I think in going through it, you'll understand how we go about thinking about how the program can be done with the most amount of success. So you can see with every child on our program, we begin with something called big picture goals. Big picture goals are our North Star. When I say our, I mean both the staff of Doman International and the parents. It's our North Star for what are we trying to achieve in this child's development in the next 6 months. So with this specific child, this, by the way, this was a child who was seen last week in India. You can see 3 big picture goals. By the way, we always choose 3 big picture goals because our mindset is if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, right? So the big picture goals are what are the 3 do or die goals that we and the parents can share together to help the child achieve. So for this specific child, the first goal that you can see is something called the language victory. So this boy, specifically that this program sheet was made for, said about 2 words of speech. You know, I think he said something like mom and, yes, something like that. So he said 2 words, but we said, okay, the big picture goal is something called a language victory. A language victory, a child has to say 10 to 25 words. And they also have to start speaking couplets, meaning word pairs like hi mom or come here or orange juice, right? Those are couplets. So we gave this child a language victory. So we basically said, okay, we want this child to go from 2 words of speech in the next 6 months to 10 to 25 words of speech. Okay, that's about, if you think about it, if a child went from 2 words to 10 words, that's a 5x increase in language, right? If they went from 2 words to 25 words, that's 12 times the amount of words. So we really aim big with the big picture goals, right? The big picture goals in our mindset should be audacious. They should be almost a little scary, okay? Achievable, because why have goals if they're not achievable? But they should be a little scary, right? Because that means, okay, we're going to have to work for this. This isn't something that is going to just come about if we don't do anything, right? So you'll never see a big picture goal, which is something like, move your arm a little bit more, or, Josh is a little more relaxed. Like you won't see something like that because that's not a North Star that we're going to fight and claw our way to achieve. So language victory is this child's first big picture goals. The second big picture goal for this child is something called an understanding victory. For an understanding victory, a child has to be able to follow 2 to 3 step instructions. So we're saying to this child only followed 1 step instruction. So you could say, get the book, that's 1 step. But you couldn't say, get the book and give it to daddy. That's 2 steps. And you definitely couldn't say, go to your room, get the book and give it to dad. That's 3 steps, right? So we're saying, okay, this child, we're going to go from this child can follow 1 step commands now to in 6 months, 2 to 3 steps. For a child to also receive an understanding victory, they need to be able to be reasoned with, right? This is so important. If a child cannot be reasoned with, right, it makes life very, very difficult. I was speaking with another family last week who came for their evaluation, and they had started a program. They'd gotten a little bit of a late start, and so they had been doing the program for about 3 months. And in the appointment, at one point, the child started to get a little bit hyperactive. He started to get a little kind of annoyed that with how long things were taking, and he started complaining. And his mother said to him, "Hey, Arnav, can you calm down for a second? Hold on. Spencer needs 5 more minutes, and then we can go out for a walk." And this child calmed down. And the mom turned to me and she said, "We couldn't do that just 3 months ago." Right? He wouldn't have understood that. That is the ability to reason, right? For us to be able to tell that child, "Give us 5 minutes, let us complete this, then you can do that." And so that boy now understood that and could cooperate with it. So for a child to receive an understanding victory, they also have to be able to be reasoned with, and they have to be able to make deals. Okay. It's a very big step in comprehension. So we're saying for this child, we're not just going for a big language goal, we're going for a big comprehension goal. So that is the second big picture goal. And you can see for this third big picture goal, reduced hyperactivity, right? This specific child was hyperactive, constantly on the move during his evaluation. It's hard for him to be calm and settled. Parents feel like this is a big priority, so do we. So we agreed this is the third big picture goal. So you can see these big picture goals are determined by parents and the staff together. That's a very important thing for me to mention. Several years ago, we used to, the staff, determine the big picture goals on our own, where we would say to the parents, "Here are the big picture goals." And a lot of the time parents agreed with that, but sometimes parents would say, "Hey, you've said reduced hyperactivity, but our son's been chronically ill. We feel that's a bigger deal." And I have to say, most of the time, the parents were right. So now we agree on the big picture goals with the parents together. And we feel that's very important that we're all on the same page. And then we develop the best program to reach the big picture goals. Now, right below the big picture goals, you can see we've listed priority programs in one block, and then under that, complementary programs. So why is this important? Well, the topic of today's podcast, right, and webinar is consistency over perfection. And we know that not every family can get every Doman program done every day, right? Life happens. Sometimes there are illnesses. Sometimes, some days children have a lot of energy. Others, they have less. Sometimes you have to go to a doctor's appointment, or grandma is ill, or there's so many things that can come up in life. So what we do with the families is we say, "Listen, here are the priority programs to reach those big picture goals," right? If we want to get that big jump in speech development, in comprehension, to reduce hyperactivity, or whatever the big picture goals are for a child, here are the most important programs. So for this specific child, you can see nutrition and supplementation is number one. Now, I would say that about 90% of the time, nutrition and supplementation is number one for a child, because in our experience, that is the foundation for getting really good cognitive and physical development. So number one program is to follow the recommendations of the nutritionist who taught you this program at Doman International, and follow the supplement recommendations. The second priority program for this specific child, and I do want to make a note here that every child is very different. And so this was a child who was diagnosed with autism, was very hyperactive, had severe speech issues, had some learning challenges, had some understanding and sensory challenges. His program sheet looks very different from, let's say, in a mobile child who's blind, right? Their two sets of programs there may be no Doman Method program which is replicated for those two children. They might have completely different programs, and rightfully so. Their brain injuries are different. Their needs are different. And so now both programs for both children would address neuroplasticity, which is the root cause problem, but in different ways. So this child received an oxygenation program called the Breathing Enhancement Program. This is a Doman Method program to increase oxygen delivery to the brain using a specialized mask. That specialized mask is very helpful for things like for this child, focus, concentration, speech development. Then the child, oh, sorry, did you say something, Colleen?
I did not.
Okay,
I was
sorry.
just nodding.
Yeah, okay. So the third program for this child is called the All Levels program. This is all levels, meaning we're going to do a little bit of each physical activity for brain development with this child. So it's all levels. So for this specific child, we're going to do a little bit of crawling on the belly each day. We're going to do a little bit of creeping on the hands and knees, a little bit of walking, and a little bit of running. Okay, those are all cross-pattern physical activities, very positive for brain development. They also address different areas of the brain. So crawling and creeping, for example, very helpful for improving sensory issues. For a child who, like this child who has auditory and tactile issues, crawling and creeping is great. Also very helpful for organization and reducing hyperactivity. Walking and running develop the cortex. That's going to be very helpful for helping reading and math ability and language. So for this child, we're doing a little bit of each activity each day to get maximum results. And then last but not least, the reading program. With a child with an autism diagnosis like this child, the reading program isn't just about teaching reading. It's also about improving comprehension and speech development. These children tend to be very good visual learners. So when we teach them language through the visual pathway, right? When we teach them a word like this, right? And we teach them with big red letters what it looks like, it helps them see the word. That helps them better understand the word and also more likely to speak the word. So we divide this program sheet into priority programs and complementary programs. And I want to say for everyone who's watching and listening to this right now, who is already on the program, very often when parents will do check-in calls with the staff, right? These are families who have already come for an appointment with Doman International, and maybe they're 3 months in, and in another 3 months, they'll come back for another appointment. Sometimes when they express, I don't know what to focus on. We've got so many great things for our child. I don't know what to focus on. I will remind them, listen, you've got your program sheet. Go back and focus on the priority programs, right? The complementary programs, if you can do them, great, but don't feel like you have to every single day. Do your best. And very often, even families who are quite seasoned on our program will say, you're absolutely right. I completely forgot to go back and look at the program sheet, right? To look at what are the big picture goals, what are we aiming toward, and what are the priority programs to get there, okay? The complementary programs, and just to be clear, the complementary programs are really important as well. They're all important, but as I said, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So the complementary programs, we say to parents, on the best days, get this all done, right? On a rough day where it's hard to get everything in, you might only get in the priority programs at the top of the program sheet. And then certain days, you might get all the priority programs done and some of the complementary programs. So you can see for this child, he's got 4 complementary programs to do at home. Choice Board, which is a program of communication where we give the child options and they can choose from the options. It's really good for starting the process of communication. I got to, last week, we had a child, or rather an adult, come for her first appointment with Doman International. She was 22 years old. And this is a girl who, or young, I really should say a woman, who at the age of 22 inconsistently can say 2 words. She can say the word Anna, which is the name of a friend, and she can say the word hi, but very inconsistently. In fact, when I met this young woman, she, her dad said to her, hey, say hi to Spencer. And she turned to me, made eye contact and went, hi. It was very hard for her. And the dad said, oh, that's a big compliment that she said hi to you because she won't do that for everyone. So I was, honored by that because it takes her so much work to do so. But the reason why I'm telling you about this 22-year-old woman is I said to the family, okay, we're going to do the choice board now. And we wrote down 2 options on a board. And we said to her, we put yes on as one choice and no as another choice. And I said to her, hey, I noticed before you were complaining when they put you into the wheelchair, were you in pain? Yes. And we pointed to yes, or no. And she pointed to yes immediately. And almost immediately it seemed like she breathed a sigh of relief, kind of like, okay, they know that me sitting in the chair was painful. She felt understood, which is an incredibly important thing that many of us take for granted each day. So once the family saw it, they went, wow, this is amazing. This is a way for us to communicate with our 22-year-old we never knew we had the opportunity to do. So then we just started asking this 22-year-old woman who hasn't spoken in many, many years, all kinds of questions. So for example, we asked her, her family has 2 homes in 2 different countries that they go back and forth between. So I asked her, do you like to live more in this country or in this country? And she really thought about it for a while and indicated one of them. And the family said, yeah, you know what? That's right. I mean, usually when we're in that country, she is kind of happier and more relaxed. So that makes a lot of sense. But they also said, we noticed she took a while to think about that one. When we asked her if she had pain, she immediately went to yes. But that one, she had to think about it a little bit. Then we asked her, oh, what's your favorite treat? So they asked her, this was the parents' idea. They asked her, what's your favorite treat? Chocolate or yogurt? She immediately went to chocolate, right? That's her favorite food. And so they were like, wow. For them, it was just a mind-blowing moment that now they had a way to communicate with their 22-year-old. And I said to them, listen, you should do this at least 3 times a day. And they said, are you kidding me? We're going to ask her like 100 questions a day. We haven't had a conversation with her in 20 years. And so that's a real life-changing moment. So the choice board is for communication. It's a way to better understand a child or an adult who cannot speak or who has limited speech. Now, for this child, you can see we gave speech development activities, and we also gave a specific program called Gemini, which is a video program for speech development. Speech development is a huge part of our program. And as we mentioned, one of the big picture goals is a language victory. So we have to give a speech development program to get there. For this child, we also gave oral integration, right? Which is, we use a vibrating brush inside and outside of the mouth so the child feels their mouth better. So that's very important. And then last but not least, we have patterning, which is a part of the mobility program, an activity to teach the brain how it feels to move in a normal cross pattern, because this child could crawl, could creep, could walk, and even run, but didn't do so in a normal cross pattern. So patterning is a way of teaching the brain for those 2 hemispheres of the brain to interact better with one another. So for this family, we say, okay, listen, go home, focus on the priority programs. When those are going consistently, then we can focus on the second group of programs, which are the complementary program. Now, Colleen, anything that you'd like to add so far?
No, I think it's so helpful to go through all of this in detail. I think that it really illustrates how customized each program is for each family. As you mentioned, a child with very different challenges would have a completely different program. There may be 0 overlap at all, which is understandable. But just also to let parents know that we do prioritize things for them so that they have a kind of a guiding star, which, it's natural as humans, things start to fray, after a couple of months, you're just doing, and it doesn't occur to you to go back and think, oh, wait, let me reorient myself to what my goal was,
Exactly right. And one of our favorite things when a family comes back 6 months later is to look at these big picture goals and say, okay, let's look at how things went, and to say, one of our favorite moments is when a child achieves all 3 big picture goals. That's a big deal. A lot of high fives and celebrations and, but even achieving one of these goals, of course, for this specific child would be life-changing. But of course, the goal is all 3. Now, usually when people look at this, they'll notice these small little numbers and they'll say, hey, what are the numbers next to each activity? So the numbers, there are two different numbers, okay? And you'll see the first number for this specific child is 3. So you'll see it's always 3, 3, 3, 3, right? That's because when we teach a new program to a family, we have found one of the easiest ways to do this with success is by teaching something called a sequence. And you can even see here, we're telling this family in the first month, do 1 sequence, and in the second month, do 2 sequences, and in the third month, 3 sequences. A sequence is simply a schedule, right, of different activities to complete in one at one time. So imagine, a sequence could be 1 session of reading, followed by 1 session of oral integration, followed by 1 session of choice board. That would be a sequence. Okay. And so for this child, you can see we said in the first month, you're going to get this sequence, and we write out the sequence for the family. We say, you're going to go through this checklist about 1 time in a day. That's 1 sequence done. But as that month goes on, the family gets faster and better, right, at doing that sequence. And we say, okay, then in the second month, when things are going well, we're going to add a second sequence. So now you're going to do this checklist 2 times in a day. Right. And then in the third month, we're going to try to get through that checklist 3 times in a day. And very often when a family starts out that 1 sequence, they might even call us the first week and say, guys, I don't know if we'll ever get to 3 sequences. I mean, it's taking us a couple hours to get this first sequence done. And we say, just wait, see how it goes. And very often by the end of that first month, they're doing that sequence 3 times faster than they were when they started it, because now they're becoming like pros, right? I was speaking to a mom last week who was returning for an appointment, and she said, "Oh, Spencer, I'm a Doman program pro at this point." Those were her words, and she was right. She knew exactly what she was doing. That same mom, when she started the program, said, "There's no way I could do all this," right? But now she's like, "I'm a pro, no problem," And she was absolutely right about that too. So you can see we're building up to getting the 3 sequences done in a day. And just to give you a sense, sometimes when families start out with that 1 sequence, it might take them an hour and a half, 2 hours to get that sequence done. But by the end of the first month, they're doing it in 45 minutes. They're getting it done very, very, very quickly. So, we help organize families much more honestly than we used to. When my grandfather started this work in the 50s and 60s and all the way up until maybe about 10 years ago, we used to tell families, okay, do 20, I'm making this up, but we'd say, okay, do 20 breathing enhancement sessions in a day and do 5 sessions of the choice board and do 3 sessions of oral integration and do 5 sessions of speech activities. All right, go home and figure it out, right? We didn't say it in that way, but we said, all right, here's your number of activities. All right, let us know how it goes. And what we found is that a lot of families in the first few months of the program were facing unnecessary hardship because they were trying to organize themselves and create checklists. And we said, all right, listen, let's make the lives of our families more easy. And now we just create the checklist for the families. We say, here's your sequence, run through this every day. And so the family doesn't have to go through that problem solving on their own. Last but not least, every child on the program is given a staff coach, one member of the team to overlook the child's progress, answer any questions and challenges that the family has once they've gone home from their appointment after visiting our clinic. In this child's case, they were given Natasha, our director of respiration, as a staff coach, which makes a lot of sense since the respiratory program is one of the big priorities for this child. So they're getting a wealth of knowledge and experience with their staff coach, one of the highest directors in the Doman International Clinic. So yeah, that is the program sheet. Just to give you a sense of what it's like. Keep in mind, that's the cover document. That's the top document that a family gets when they come for an appointment. But for each session that they receive at the Doman International Clinic, they are given notes for that specific meeting. So when they meet with that respiratory staff member about the breathing enhancement program, they will receive videos and documents of how to do that properly. They learn how to do everything from the staff. We teach it to them, but we also give all of the recommendations in writing, and also we provide videos as well, so the families can, even when they go home and they go, wait a second, how do we do this again? They can always go back to those things. And worst case scenario, if they have any challenges, their staff coach is always there if needed. All right. Well, Colleen, should we go to some of the pre-submitted questions that we received?
We only have the two. Why don't we do the questions that are in the chat for the moment?
Perfect. Well, I got one here from Varsha that said, it's so lovely meeting you in Delhi, Spencer. It was great meeting you too, Varsha. Yeah, welcome. It's always a pleasure. I just got back yesterday from India, everyone, where we saw families in Bangalore and in New Delhi. We've got a question here. What would you recommend to help an 8-month-old with Down syndrome with his tongue positioning and mouth breathing? Can anything be done before the breathing program?
And Spencer, this is Ella, who's coming to see us in July, because her next comment, she mentions that she's really excited to see us in July.
Thank you so much for today's episode. I'm on the verge of burnout and my son is only 8 months old. Okay. I cannot wait to see you in July and get the help we need. Okay. Well, listen, if we look at a child with Down syndrome, 8 months old, the issues that you're mentioning, tongue positioning and mouth breathing, very common issues. Let me just talk for a second before I answer your question about why mouth breathing is problematic. My grandfather was aware of the issue of mouth breathing back in the 50s and 60s. One of his closest colleagues was someone named Raymond Dart. Dr. Raymond Dart was an anthropologist who was most famous for discovering an ancestor of humans called Australopithecus africanus. And Raymond Dart brought an anthropological view to the Doman Method that I think was very helpful for my grandfather. And one of the things Dr. Dart, I didn't know about this, by the way, because Dr. Dart passed away before I was born, but my dad was telling me recently, Dr. Dart was very focused on mouth breathing with children with special needs, because he said to my grandfather, no other primates are mouth breathers. They breathe through their nose. And he said, this is not a natural way to live. And he was absolutely right. And he was hyper-focused on getting children to be nasal breathers long before it was really understood why it was important. So why is it so much better to breathe through your nose than through your mouth? Well, first of all, if you breathe through your mouth, you expose yourself to infection much easier, right? In our nose, we have nostrils that help keep out dust and bacteria and other small particles. When your mouth is open, that doesn't happen. So children who are mouth breathers are more prone to illness. The second thing is that when our mouths are closed, you'll notice this if your mouth is closed right now, your tongue rests actually up at the roof of your mouth. And for young children, that's important to have the tongue resting up at the top of the roof of the mouth, because it actually pushes on the palate and helps expand that top palate, which is very important for the teeth and for facial structure. And many children with Down syndrome, because they are mouth breathers, they never get that access to palate expansion. And so you're on the right track here, focusing on the mouth breathing. Two things that I can think of that you could start. The first is oral integration, which is stimulation inside and outside of the mouth. Now, we probably a couple months ago did a session on oral integration. I don't know, Colleen, if there's a way for us to find that quickly and get it for Ella. But what I could do is I could send you maybe I could send you a video, Colleen, that you could send on of how to do oral integration using a brush called the Z Vibe, which is a vibrating brush. And that can be very helpful for helping the child better feel their mouths. There's also another tool that we've been using more and more recently with children with Down syndrome or children who consistently have their mouths open. And it's something called the Myo Munchie. The Myo Munchie is very good for strengthening the jaw and the lips and improving the ability for a child to keep their mouths closed for longer and longer. Let me see if I can quickly share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. Yeah, the Myo Munchie, you can see it says the small chewing device making a big impact on oral health and development. It's something that can be used at a young age. Here you can see a girl utilizing it, and it strengthens the jaw, as I said, and the lips, and helps the child learn to keep their mouth closed for longer and longer periods. So now there are other reasons for keeping the mouths open, and one of them is breathing. So you mentioned the breathing program, and that's why the breathing program is so profound for children with Down syndrome, because it helps them with respiration, which they typically have a challenge with, along with most children with special needs. Most children have some issues with regulating their breath. And so when we combine activities like oral integration, the Myo Munchie, and the breathing enhancement program, we can get really good results with helping a child keep their mouth closed. One last thing that I'd like to say. When we can train a child to keep their mouth closed, not only does it help reduce infections, not only does it help with palate expansion, we find that the children sleep better. They get better quality sleep because their oxygenation during sleep is better. Better quality sleep, and they tend to sleep for longer. All right. We've got a question here from Ludwin, who says, hello, my name is Ludwin. I'm from Nicaragua. My baby girl is 16 months old and has multiple deficits such as hypotonic, visual issues, language delay. She doesn't walk or sit. Okay. And then Ludwin has a small follow-up question here, Colleen, about how much in terms of pricing. Okay, so Ludwin, a couple of things. So first of all, I do want to say 16 months old, great time to get started with the program. Everything you've mentioned, from hypotonia, visual issues, language delay, walking problems, these are all issues because of brain development, and all things that the Doman method can help with. I do want to recommend, I see you speak both English and Spanish, but if you want a good book in Spanish, I'm just going to grab one off my shelf. We have a book called The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, but this is the Spanish translation called El Método Doman de Necesidades Especiales al Bienestar. It's available on Amazon, so I do recommend this book for you. In terms of pricing, it depends. If you're coming to our clinic, it depends on where you're coming, because we have various locations. We have our headquarters in Philadelphia, so some Central American families come to Philadelphia. Some come to see us in Miami twice a year. Oh, Colleen, I knew we were missing someplace. We didn't mention Miami. Yeah.
That's the one.
What are the dates for Miami, Colleen?
So September 25th to 28th. So we have a few appointments. We have 2 appointments on the 25th, 3 on the 26th, 1 on the 28th. But if you're traveling, it's all got to be done on the 26th. It's a whole thing, but we can tell you about it. But those are the dates that Rosalind will be there, and Marialba as well. And I believe, Ludwin, that you've been in touch with Marialba. I'm just messaging her now as well. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, because Ludwin, if you come to Philadelphia, Miami, or if you do a remote online appointment, let's say it's not possible for you to travel, the pricing is slightly different for all 3 options. So my first recommendation would be to jump on a call with Marialba, who's our Spanish-speaking representative, or Colleen, but Colleen says you've probably already been in touch with Marialba.
Oh, apparently, no, I'm wrong. Ludwin, we had your email address, but I think we don't have any kind of messaging phone number for you. You can direct message that to me if you don't want to put it in the chat. Direct message to my WhatsApp, or even direct message to any of our social platforms, because those all come to me directly. But yeah, that's my WhatsApp number right there, is probably the quickest way.
Yeah. So I think, Ludwin, just jump on a call and talk through the different options. And then also whether you speak to Colleen or Marialba, they'll also give you certain free, access to free lectures online. So you can even start learning about the program before you come to our clinic. Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add to that, Colleen?
No, I think that's everything for the moment. Yeah. But yeah, please. I think we are kind of in touch, but messaging is generally the easiest way.
All right, we've got a question here from Waleed on Instagram, who's asking, could you go over the breathing program again and why it's important? Thank you. So why is the Doman Method breathing program important? So as I said before, every child that we work with, their underlying issue is in brain development. And whether they've been diagnosed with autism or Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or learning problems or speech delay or one of the hundreds of diagnoses that we see at Doman International, all of them have one thing in common, which is their root cause issue is in the brain. And oxygen is the food of the brain. The human brain, even though it makes up something like 2% of the human body's weight, right? Only 2%. The brain requires more than 20% of the body's oxygen. And it just makes sense. If you think about it almost like a computer, it needs the most computing power, right? So oxygen is going to be fed and prioritized to the brain because the brain needs oxygen to survive. And so humans can survive weeks without food or water, but we can only survive maybe 3 or 4 minutes without oxygen. It's crucial for our survival. So what we have found is that almost all children that we see, in one way or another, have breathing that is shallow or that is dysregulated. So they're not breathing as fully and as deeply as they should be, or their breathing is not nearly as patterned and regulated as other children. And so that often leads to a lower oxygen saturation, meaning their brain and vital organs have less oxygen crossing through their body through the bloodstream. So what we do with the breathing program is we increase oxygen delivery to the brain. And it's because the breathing program has a special effect, which is called vasodilation, which means the blood vessels expand. And when they expand, the blood vessels can then transport more blood. And when more blood travels through the brain, it carries with it more oxygen, because that's how that's how oxygen is transported through blood. So you expand the blood vessels, more blood supply brings more oxygen supply. When we do that with children, that increased oxygenation often results in more energy. So you'll see a child who might be, let's say, hypotonic, who has poor muscle tone, poor energy. All of a sudden, they become more sprightly and energetic. For a child who is very disconnected and hyperactive, you might see that they become more focused and their concentration gets better. Very often when we improve breathing, it's easier for a child to produce sound. So we see more sound and more speech. So for example, I was speaking to a family earlier this morning, just doing a check-in call 1 month after their visit. And they said, oh, our child is vocalizing more since we've started the breathing program. That's a very, very common thing for us to say. Very often for children who have frequent respiratory illnesses, it helps clear out, because our breathing program induces deep breathing. Similar to like if you sprinted 100 or 200 meters, you'd be breathing deeply at the end. So does our oxygenation program. That helps clear the lungs of mucus. And so for children, especially who are not very active and constantly dealing with mucus in the nose and lungs, it's amazing. And then last but not least, it helps eliminate seizures. So let me give a quick example. This was a family that I spoke to on Friday. So this family came for their first appointment in March, so 2 months ago. And the family said that their child regularly had seizures every month. And every month, like clockwork, had a seizure. And so they started in March, no seizure in March. After doing the oxygenation program, no seizure in April. Okay. So this child, like I said, you could set an alarm to go off each month and they would have a seizure. They went 2 months, and up until 2 days ago, so now it's on 3 months, they had their first seizure since starting the program. Okay. So they went from every month to now going almost 3 months without a seizure. And I said to the mom, okay, now what happened before the seizure occurred 2 days ago? And the mom started to name things that had changed, and she said, it's interesting. My child got, had a upper respiratory congestion about 5 or 6 days ago, and I stopped the breathing program. And that's when the light bulb, we were just talking, but the light bulb went off in her head like, oh, okay, maybe it was the breathing enhancement program all along that was helping avoid the seizures. And so, so the oxygenation program can be very, very profound for reducing seizures for children that have them, and sometimes completely preventing the seizures. And so with that specific child, we said, okay, we're going to restart this breathing enhancement program as soon as possible, because obviously they're helping fend off the seizures. All right, we've got a question here from Motika, who says, thanks so much. My daughter has Down syndrome and is 20 months old. I do patterning with her. She creeps and holds on to furniture in order to stand. She is not yet walking. Please, am I doing the right thing? If not, please, what can I do to help her start walking? Also, I'm not consistent because of the nature of my job. Please, can you guide me on a mobility program for my baby? Well, first of all, you're doing all the most important things right. So, first of all, you're doing patterning. That is incredibly important for her to teach her brain how it feels to move in a cross pattern. And with a child who does not walk yet, doing creeping on the hands and knees is the best thing that you can do. It's very, very good for improving the balance centers of the brain. And so you want to have her creep as much as possible. And right now you say that she's holding onto furniture in order to stand. That's great. But what I would recommend, especially with a child at 20 months who's creeping, I would move the furniture to around the walls of the room. Okay, so I wouldn't have a lot of furniture in the middle of the rooms of your house. And so I'd move everything to the outside. And then I would place your child in the middle of a room and have them creep over to furniture and pull themselves up to a standing position. Let them play for a little bit, pick them back up, put them down in the middle of the room, have them creep again. The reason why is I know that at 20 months of age, many parents are hyper-focused on getting a child to walk. But here's the thing. Your daughter's going to walk. It's just a matter of time. But there's only a very short period in your daughter's life where she will be creeping on her hands and knees for transportation. And creeping is very helpful for developing a part of the brain called the midbrain, which is very good for auditory and tactile processing. So auditory processing for children with Down syndrome tends to be a big challenge, right? They tend to have hearing issues. Sometimes processing language is hard for them. They very often have tactile issues, like they might be hyper or hyposensitive to touch. Very often they have a strabismus where you'll see a misalignment of the eyes. Very common for children with Down syndrome to have a convergent strabismus where an eye floats inward. Creeping is really good for visual control. So creep, 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 that's what you want to be focusing on. Like I said, your daughter will walk, but creeping is super, super important, Motika. Colleen, have you spoken to Motika before?
I have. We spoke last summer. And I'm thinking, Motika, I'm going to message you directly because I've got some ideas for resources that we can share and just help to get you better answers to your questions. I love that you're coming to the session though, because that's what this is for, more questions.
Absolutely. And some of I'm assuming, Motika, you've already read The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness. If you haven't, I recommend that book. But another book that would be helpful is, hold on, I'm just grabbing it. This book written by my dad, Douglas, called From Immobility to Walking would be a really, really good resource. It says the Doman Method plan to teach a special needs child to walk and run. And there's all kinds of great balanced development activities in this book that would be helpful for your child. And I definitely recommend connecting with Colleen again, because she can probably give you access to more resources. But I think you're definitely on the right track. All right. So, Chantenay, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct. Do you get good results with kids with tracheostomy and the breathing program? 3-year-old with vocal cord palsy and lissencephaly? Yes, we do. We have a lot of children with tracheostomies doing our breathing program. And by the way, they usually need the program more than anyone else because they very often have labored breathing. And so improving their lung capacity is greatly important. And it really helps them with, being able to do everything from eventually orally feed to, with sound production. It's greatly important as well for just their health. And as I said, clearing the lungs. Very often with kids with trachs who have, you can just constantly hear congestion when they're breathing. The breathing enhancement program gets rid of that. So absolutely. Chantenay, I'm guessing you already know we have a child on our program with lissencephaly named Oakley, and probably you follow them on social media, but if you don't, just in case you don't, I highly recommend. I think the Instagram tag is Acorn Updates.
Chantenay knows all about Oakley.
Yeah, okay, that was my guess.
He's in South Africa, so they're working toward hopefully coming to see us in Italy.
In Italy, yeah. Yeah, Colleen a couple of weeks ago wrote me and said, mentioned there might be a South African family interested in coming to Italy. So absolutely, it can be very helpful. I would say probably one of our most important programs for a kid with a trach. All right. Oh, Colleen. Wow, you found the oral integration episode, Colleen.
And I messaged it to her directly. It was easy. They're all on YouTube. Les is so organized. So everything, the titles are right there. It's really great.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So, we've got Ellie here says, thank you. I will definitely get a Myo Munchie and watch your session on oral integration. Fantastic. Chantenay is saying, thank you for explaining the importance of the breathing program. Okay, Waleed is saying, the Doman method paired with stem cell therapy, what's your opinion about this combination? Okay, so Waleed, we've known about stem cell therapy for probably about 20 years. And especially in the beginning, we honestly saw almost no results from stem cell therapy. We've always believed in the concept behind stem cell therapy, but it didn't seem to get practical results with children. Over the last 5 years, on occasion, I have started to hear about children who had good results with stem cell therapy, but I would still say it is few and far between. So it seems to be that there are certain children who respond well to it, but then other children who don't seem to have other results. I've started to see a lot over the last 6 to 8 weeks about new forms of stem cell therapy that are appearing on the scene and seem to be getting better results. Now, I am naturally skeptical in the beginning about these things because I've been through this process many, many times where you'll see a you'll see a kind of new treatment kind of butt up and explode, and everyone goes and does it. And then after some time, it starts to fade away because a lot of the parents that were attracted to it kind of found it didn't deliver the results they were hoping for. And this happens every few years. Some new thing pops up. And so I would say I am optimistic about stem cell therapy for the long term. But right now, I'm very skeptical still that it is at the point where it's going to produce significant results for the majority of children. Of course, if there are any parents who are here who have had a really positive experience, feel free to post it in the comments or send me information about it, because that's how we learn, right? I would say probably half of the new treatments Doman International has added over the first 5 years. The last 5 years have actually been first recommended to us by parents, where a parent said, hey, we tried this and it worked. And then maybe the other half were conceptualized by our clinical team and we came up with them ourselves. But there are two ways to learn: come up with something new or learn something from someone else. So, but we have to find that it produces significant, consistent results before adding it to our program. And we have not gotten to that place yet with stem cell therapy. So we have an open mind, but we're not there yet. Okay. Oh, Mutika is saying, thanks so much. I'm struggling to get the books.
In Cameroon. Yeah.
In Cameroon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll keep thinking about that. What are ways we can do to make them get them more accessible? All right. So, it's rare that someone asks me a question about something that's new to me. Is an EWOT, exercise with oxygen therapy machine, useful for oxygenation for special needs kids? I would have to do more research on exactly what EWOT is. What I will say is that if you, with our breathing program that I mentioned before, it's a vasodilator that dilates the blood vessels and lets more blood carry oxygen to the brain and to the vital organs. If you inhale oxygen directly, right? Which is a little counterintuitive, if you inhale oxygen directly, it acts as a vasoconstrictor. It actually constricts the blood vessels. So my first reaction is, if we're talking about someone doing exercise and breathing pure oxygen, that might actually constrict blood vessels, may not be ideal for brain oxygenation. But that's just my first thought. And it's why we don't do direct oxygen therapy with a child. We use other breathing programs that lead to a series of events that results in increased oxygen delivery to the brain.
I think it goes along with, and you've mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating as often as possible, that all of our programs are designed to be self-eliminating over time. We don't want kids to need to be hooked up to oxygen for the rest of their lives. We want to create the situation, where they're getting better oxygenation by the function of their bodies. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So every program we do is supposed to be self-eliminating, including the Doman Method. The whole goal is to get the child to the point where they're no longer reliant on the program itself or on the different treatments that we use, because we're trying to build independence, not dependence. And so much of the medical industry right now is built on dependence. Give this child the medication and the child is dependent on it for usually the rest of their lives. That model often comes with serious side effects. And usually the individual, as they build dependency, their own quality of life and function decreases. They become more dependent on whatever it is they're being given. And so they become less independent over time. And sometimes even addicted in the case of drug therapy. So, so each part of the program is meant to be self-eliminating, meaning we get to the child to a specific place where they no longer need it. I started off this session by going over that child's program sheet with those big picture goals. When a child achieves those big picture goals that we're working toward, so many of those programs that I showed you on that program sheet become unnecessary because they've now reached the next level of development. They don't need those things anymore. They need new treatments. And so that's why the last time we sat down and counted, we had over 400 different programs and treatments that we utilize. Yeah, just to clarify, it says here the child wears a breathing mask while exercising on the machine. And that's what I guessed by what you were writing. But again, if they're inhaling pure oxygen, probably not ideal for brain function. It might be the pure oxygen, maybe for muscle function, I'm not sure, might be beneficial in some way. Again, I haven't looked into it, but for brain oxygenation, it's not going to be ideal. All right. Everyone, we are out of time. Colleen, do you want to just speak for a second on how people can reach out to you if they want to learn?
Absolutely, yes. So if you have questions, even if your primary language is not English, I can get you in touch with one of our reps who speaks your language. We have reps speaking Spanish, Serbian, Russian, Italian. So please reach out. My email address, this is my direct email, is info@domaninternational.org. Sometimes people think that's like a general email because it's info, but it is actually me. There is no Colleen at, so if you ever try to email Colleen at, it's not going to go anywhere. And then my message number, you can call or text or WhatsApp, is country code 1-814-232-8668. And there's never any obligation, when you reach out to us, but we have a lot of resources and information to share. And certainly for families who are thinking about getting involved with us directly, we have appointments available and we'd love to work with you.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, Colleen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.